When I say food system, what first comes to your mind? Is it a grocery store with shelves stocked full of food? Or maybe a small, local market? A family gathered around a dining table? Or kids in a school cafeteria? Do you imagine ships and trucks transporting food? A food processing plant? A farmer working the land, both near and far? Animals grazing in a pasture? Or maybe a more intensive facility? A cook in a restaurant, or you at home in your kitchen. Maybe you are less optimistic and you see a landfill full of wasted food. No matter what it is you pictured, you are probably correct, as the food system contains all of these things and more. The Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations defines the food system as the entire range of actors and their interlinked value-adding activities involved in the production, aggregation, processing, distribution, consumption, and disposal of food products that originate from agriculture, forestry, or fisheries, and parts of the broader economic, societal, and natural environments in which they are embedded, which is a definition as complex as the system itself. Simply put, the food system contains all players that make the consumption of food possible. And there are a lot of players. While the vastness of the food system may be hard to grasp, its importance is not. The food system will play an important role in the future, but it can be a positive or a negative one. In a way, we are at a crossroads, with options to go backward, push forward towards new innovations, or continue business as usual. Of course, we don't want to go backwards. Moving forward certainly seems ideal, but is it necessary? What would happen if things continued as they are currently? What if business in the food system was conducted as usual, or unchanging despite any difficulties or disturbances that may arise? Today, we will first look at what business as usual means within the food system. Then we'll apply this to the future. And finally, we will decide if business as usual truly is a viable option for the food system. First, what even is business as usual? If we paused the food and agricultural system now and never changed again, what would that look like? For starters, it is important to note that our population would still be growing and shifting. The United Nations predicts that Earth's population will reach 9.8 billion people by the year 2050 and 11.2 billion by the year 2100. Additionally, more of these people will be moving into urban areas and out of agricultural work in rural areas. Finally, with decreasing fertility rates and increasing life expectancies, we will see aging populations overall, but especially in the agricultural industry. Under business as usual, the agriculture industry will not respond to these shifts, but continue production as it is right now. While the agricultural system does a lot of things right, we cannot deny that some trends also have a negative impact on people and the environment. Trends like high amounts of food loss and waste, misuse of natural resources, and over-application of inputs like fertilizers and pesticides can make production inefficient. Furthermore, business as usual would prevent any new policies or research and development to offset this inefficiency. Even more troubling, while food gets wasted in many homes, still 828 million people worldwide are hungry, and over 2 billion people are facing food insecurity to some degree yearly, according to the FAO. This means that the food we do produce isn't being distributed efficiently either. With a higher understanding of business as usual, we can now predict the consumer response to these conditions. Achim Doberman, with the United Kingdom's Rothamsted Research, anticipates that meat consumption would rise from about 88 pounds per capita per year in 2010 to about 110 pounds per capita per year in 2050, which is a 64% increase. Cereal consumption is also predicted to rise. The per capita increase is more gradual, but when considering the cereals needed to feed an influx of meat animals, there is a 52% increase in demand, or 1.1 billion more tons of grain each year. It is expected to see this growth in other commodities as well. However, we still have the same amount, or more likely less arable land or land deemed suitable for growing crops to produce these commodities. Converting more land to agricultural purposes will trigger forest and biodiversity loss, and expanding urban areas will also be competing for this growth at the same time. Agriculturalists will have a hard time rising to this increase in demand under business as usual, but if they don't, food prices will rise even higher than we are seeing today. As we can see, innovation is required to keep up with increasing consumer demand. Allocating more agricultural land simply isn't a sustainable option for meeting this influx in demand for food and other agricultural products. None of this seems too promising in the case for business as usual, which leads us to ponder, is it a viable option? It can be easy to want to stay the same, but increasing consumption, despite a decrease in arable land and an increase in food prices, makes it very challenging to see the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. While these goals are all interconnected, Goal 1, no poverty, and Goal 2, zero hunger, will be very difficult to achieve by the target year 2030 under a business as usual model. In fact, it is predicted that poverty and hunger would remain the same or possibly worsen by that time. Stating this, we can see that business as usual isn't a viable option for the food system. Fortunately, there are opportunities for innovations and improvements to offset these shifts in population, climate, and consumer demand, though it will take a collective effort. As we recall, the food system includes all levels of the food supply chain, from the producer to consumer, with stops in between for processing and transport. Innovations and improvements can be implemented at all levels so that the risks of business as usual don't become reality. These can range from large, multinational policies and agreements to small actions in your own home. It is not my place to say which improvements are better than others, at least not at this particular time. Instead, it is more important to recognize that any movement forward is better than not changing under the business as usual model. Today, we defined business as usual in the food system. Then, we saw what this would mean for both producers and consumers in the future. More specifically, we saw that staying the same likely means actually stepping backwards. Finally, we concluded that business as usual has too many risks and will not allow us to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by the year 2030, making it a poor option moving towards the future. With this in mind, understand that collective action is most necessary in accomplishing the Sustainable Development Goals. Business as usual will not get us there, but choosing to go forwards at this food system's crossroads means that we can leave business as usual in the past.